Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, from wherever you're connected. Good evening. This is Manish Shanbag from EIPM, the European Institute of Purchasing Management. And today we are going to go through this webinar together on the topic of sustainability in procurement. Okay. We have myself and Fred from EIPM, who is also connected on the call. He will be helping you with the chat moderation. So in case you have any questions or comments or at any point of time, please utilize the chat function. This is a moderated chat. If you have any questions at any point, I could take these questions immediately or at a logical break or at the end of the session. Okay. So this session is going to last around 45 minutes to 1 hour, let's say, and we can have a Q&A also at the end. Yeah. Right. So through the chat facility. Okay, good. So just to give you a background, we have a lot of people who have connected from, I was just looking at the geographies of the people. We have people from Europe largely today. Yeah. And from Poland, Switzerland, France, Germany. There are a couple of people also from Asia who are connected. England, Portugal, South Africa even. Yeah. So a lot of variety in terms of geography and from different industries. Yeah. I was noting down the people who are connected. So we have people from pharmaceutical industry, the telecom industry, chemical, banking, insurance, IT, heavy manufacturing, logistics. So that's a wide variety of people who are connected as well. So that's I'm glad that you could spend 45 minutes to 1 hour of your time this morning, this afternoon, this evening, and thank you very much for that. We're going to jump up straight into the topic of sustainability in procurement. Okay, this is the quick agenda that we're going to look at. So we're going to look at what is sustainability. Okay, what is the definition broadly? Let's say we're going to have a small poll around this in a minute. We're going to look at the changing priority of sustainability over a period of time, how the priority of sustainability has changed in corporate environment, meeting the demands with the ecological limits of the planet. What does it mean for purchasing in the end, and how to do? So we're looking at the what is sustainability, why is it becoming so important, what does it mean for purchasing, and how can purchasing integrate sustainability? So we're going to answer some of these questions, at least try to answer in a short span of 45 minutes to 1 hour. Okay, great. So let's look at the first topic, which is what is sustainability. Okay, and for that, I'm just going to quickly launch a short survey. So you're going to see on front of your screen a particular question with some choices. Okay, so I'll just wait for, let's say, 30 seconds or so. Very simple. Go through the choices and tell me what you think about sustainability. Okay, so you have what according to you are the constituents of sustainability. It's a multiple choice. Go ahead, you can answer. And don't forget to click done. Okay, as soon as you're done. Okay, so I've started to see the answers. I'll give you a minute, let's say. Okay, excellent, good. I can see good progress. Now, some of you have not responded. Maybe you have multiple choices, yeah. So you could select multiple choices. Not necessary that there is one answer, yeah. You have multiple answers, and it could be all right. Yes, I'll convey your greetings to Bernard as well. I can see that in the messages. Absolutely. Good. Let's keep last 20 seconds, let's say, to close for those who haven't answered yet. Okay. Okay, last 10 seconds. All right. I'm going to close the vote in 3, 2, 1. Let's see how you guys have answered. Okay, you can probably see this on the screen now. Okay, so what according to you is are the constituents of sustainability? You have given certain choices, focusing on long-term goals of the company without much regard to short-term. So 13, so 29% think that that is one part of sustainability. It's good to hear that not many have said that sustainability is only about maintaining a good brand image. So that's certainly not the only purpose of sustainability. It is one of the purposes, one of the constituents. But I can see here the most answers that you have is undertaking actions that are compatible with the protection of the environment and society and so on. So that's good. So if you see that typically we have CSR, which is good. Then you have future-proof oneself for the scarcity in supply. Yeah, that's also a part of sustainability. That in fact the word sustain comes from having which talks itself about long-term. So future-proofing oneself is one of the constituents, and reduction in energy consumption and waste reduction and so on and so forth. Okay, so we have seen some of the answers. In fact, it touches all elements except that, of course, sustainability is not only about maintaining a good brand image, it is about other things. Plus, it is not only about the short-term goals, but it considers long-term goals as well. Okay, so this is what we have seen from the from your opinion. Let me get back to the presentation. Okay, right. So by definition itself, sustainability is an ability, yeah, to maintain at a certain level. If you just look at the verb form of it, yeah, it's an ability to maintain at a certain level, sustain. Okay, but is what we call as the 3 P's: the people, profit, and planet. Right? These are the 3 elements: the people, profit, and planet, which are basically the social fabric, the economic fabric, and the environmental fabric in the community, where we live. And what we see here is typically businesses. Sorry, just a second. Hello, Fred, you're here? I think I lost connection.
It's working now.
Fred?
It's working, yeah.
It's working. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I just lost connection for a minute. Okay. So what we're looking at is a short-term approach for profits, because that's where the stakeholders are interested in largely. Then you have a medium-term approach, which is also including the people, the stakeholders, the larger stakeholder, and the environment, of course, which is a longer term. So that's why we have, whenever there are actions, whenever there are businesses which talk about economic contribution, social contribution, and environmental contribution, all these 3 combined is what we get to the center of the diagram, which is a sustainable business. So when we talk about sustainable businesses, we are largely talking about contribution across these 3 parameters of people, profit, and planet. Okay, so that's a classical definition of sustainability. So any actions, any events, any initiatives that are basically touching these 3 elements at the same time over a period of time is what we call it as a sustainable business practices. Okay, so let's look at some of the changing priorities of sustainability. Okay, now that we know the definition, which is very basic, let's look at how sustainability has changed our priority. So I'll just start off this with the Earth Day that we had this year. Yeah, it was on April 22nd, which was the 50th anniversary of the Earth Day. Started in 1970. Okay, this particular celebration of the Earth Day. And why I wanted to mention this Earth Day here is I'm trying to map on. So on the right hand bottom, you see this very classical Maslow's pyramid of of needs, of human needs. I guess everybody knows this structure where we have very basic of clothing, shelter, and food at the bottom, which are basic needs of any human being, and then we go on to security and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to do here is map on that same fundamental to a business environment. Okay, and in the business environment, largely at the basis, so why do businesses exist? Largely is to make profits, right? So I call that as the bottom of the pyramid approach. Here we have profitability, and then slightly above that is stability. So you want to maintain that over a longer term because you want to make your stakeholders happy effectively, right? And then above that, there could be, depending on the companies, depending on the industries and domains and so on, there could be various priorities for companies. Some companies might be interested in innovation, some others in risk management, some others in justification of certain practices that they're doing, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there could be various priorities, but the basic priorities of companies are profitability and longer term profitability, which is basically stability. These are the very crux of the operational needs, which are then answerable to the stakeholders, right? Now, if we look at sustainability a few years ago was in the upper part of the pyramid. Okay, maybe it could have, I don't know if I didn't trace back a long time ago, but could have probably started at the top. It was nice to have kind of a language in business. It's nice to have, sustainability is nice to have. Let's look at the planet, and let's look at the social fabric later on, but largely the focus was on profitability. Now, what has happened over the past few years is sustainability has in fact trickled down towards the bottom of the pyramid, which means it is getting more and more important as a part of a basic fabric of a business. Okay, along with profitability and stability, it has become one of the basic fabrics of business, and that's why it's becoming more and more important. And if you look at the World Economic Forum reports, largely for the past 8 years, there could be variations. For example, last year there was a lot of focus on cryptocurrencies. Before that, there was focus on artificial intelligence and blockchain and so on and so forth. So there are ups and downs based on the different topics, but the constant theme over the past 8 years has been about globalization, climate change, and gender equality. This has been a constant, absolutely constant theme across so many years. So we can say that very clearly, sustainability has definitely trickled down. Plus, it is becoming more and more talked about, more and more important across various industries, across various geographies. So this is where we have a changing priority. And if you don't embrace the notion of sustainability now, it could be a bit late. You might be getting late onto the bandwagon, and you might lose out on a lot of things. And we'll see that with the advantages that sustainability provides. Okay, but this is the basic notion to tell you that sustainability has become very critical now, and it's coming down almost towards the bottom of the Maslow's pyramid of business, let's say, along with profitability and stability. Okay, then a quick word on the meeting demands within the ecological limit. So I'm just going to give a little bit of short theory before, and then we will move on to the practical applications of what does it mean for purchasing. So for those of you who probably haven't seen this graph before anytime, here is on the x-axis, what we have is the Human Development Index. Okay, from 0 to 1, 1 being a very high Human Development Index. Okay, which means loosely translated, let's say, to a good standard of living. Okay, loosely translated to a good standard of living. So that's the high human development, and across various parameters. We will not get into those parameters now. And on the y-axis, we talk about purely, in this case, we talk about the biocapacity, which is again translated into the number of Earths that are necessary to sustain that kind of Human Development Index. Okay, so if we look at some of the countries now, and you can see on the indications, we have some countries which are very high in Human Development Index, the one at the with the orange dot right at the top. I think that is Qatar. Or the one below it, which is in blue, is Luxembourg. And then you have tons of countries below, we can see. But if you notice the trend, what we see is that from a lot of countries which are in Africa, Asia, Central America, which are on the left side with a lower human development index, as and when we start moving towards the right, which means as and when we are going towards development, a better standard of living, etc., the curve tends to move upwards. Okay, the curve tends to move upwards, which means in order to maintain that kind of a human development index, we are exhausting much more resources. Okay, and that's where the definition of biocapacity comes in. I'll just, the next slide quickly explains that. But what it loosely translates to is that the number of Earths necessary, to sustain that kind of a high development index is higher as we move towards a higher human development index. Okay, so you can see largely European, North American countries here, where there is a relatively higher standard of living, higher human development index, but at the same time, higher biocapacity, which means they're using the number of Earths necessary to sustain that is higher. And this is what is going to happen in the future as well. And as big countries like India and China and a large part of Africa were moving very quickly towards the higher human development index, are going to use more and more resources, which is going to put much more pressure on the Earth as well. So this is just telling you why this is becoming critical, and we will see how what are the different action plans that you could take eventually to try and sustain this kind of a development. Okay, so this gives you a quick graph, and the next one, as I said, this refers to what is the ecological footprint. Basically, it is in simple terms, it measures how fast we consume resources, okay, and generate waste, as compared to how fast nature can absorb waste and generate new resources. Okay, so that's how the cycle is defined as the ecological footprint across various parameters of energy, settlement, timber, food, and seafood. And then as compared to that, if we have the carbon footprint, we have the built up land, forest areas, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now if we look at another key factor, which was the Earth, as I said, the number of Earths that are necessary. If we continue at the same rate, so if you look at the same rate, the black line, right? If we continue with the same rate without much action plans, we will see that there is this term which we call the Earth Overshoot Day. Okay, the Earth Overshoot Day is going to go quite high, and it will come to around June 28th by 2030. Okay, June 28th by 2030. However, if we have certain action plans to reduce the carbon emissions and so on and so forth, it's going to get reduced. And we will see that very quickly. I just put in a slide this morning, which was quite interesting, and I'll share that with you in the next one. But what it means is, imagine it's like you have your budgets, right? Imagine you have a budget at the 1st of January, and this budget is basically the resources of this Earth. Okay, what the Earth Overshoot Day means is that you're going to exhaust your budget. So you're going to exhaust all your natural resources on that particular day. So for 2020, for example, the Earth Overshoot Day was August 22nd. So from January 1st, we have already exhausted all the budget, all the natural resources by August 22nd. And what we are doing now is borrowing resources from the following year. We are borrowing resources from the following year. So the Overshoot Day is August 22nd. So which means that we need more Earths than necessary. Yeah, that we have only one. Yeah, so we need more Earths, and if we continue at that trend, we would probably require 2 Earths by 2030 at this rate. Okay, and this is all again linked to how the countries are behaving. If you look at the various countries' performance and so on and so forth. Okay, what we have seen before. But one interesting point, and this is what I said, that I just picked out this particular graph this morning. And if you look at one very interesting fact, that typically over the past 50 years almost, we have been consuming the resources at a much rapid rate. And if you look at from 2010 onwards, there have been a decent improvement. Let's say the slope of the curve has reduced. So from 2010 onwards to 2019, we have been around August 1st, August 2nd, August 5th, kind of date. But what do you see there in from 2019 to 2020? There has been a significant improvement. There has been a very significant improvement in terms of Earth Overshoot Day, which means to give you a concrete example, in 2019, the Earth Overshoot Day was July 29th. Okay, so July 29th, we have exhausted all our resources. But this year, the Earth Overshoot Day was August 22nd, as I said, which means effectively we have performed better in terms of keeping our natural resources for a longer time. So our budget was kept for a longer time. Instead of exhausting it in July, we have kept it for a longer time to August. And obviously, you have all these reasons of doing that. The biggest reason, as we can see, was the COVID, the coronavirus, which had a huge impact. And you can see that also. It has a huge impact on carbon footprint and world travel and so on and so forth. So there are multiple reasons that followed. Then a slowing of economic activity and so on and so forth, which pulled back the Earth Overshoot Day. Okay, effectively. So I have some comments. I have some questions. I just take one question here. Let's see. Yeah, that's right. Somebody here is asking, the number of Earths is referred to maintain the human development standard, assuming all people on Earth would live at this level. Absolutely. Assuming that we have people living on the same level, the same human development index or the same standard of living. This is where the Earth, the number of Earths required would be referred to it. If there are, and today we can see there are different variations, different big differences in the standard of living. But assuming it's exactly the same standard of living, we have the Earth Overshoot Day defined accordingly. Okay, absolutely. Okay, so this is I don't know whether we call it a positive change or whichever way. The COVID crisis has brought about this change. It's a fact that the Earth Overshoot Day was pulled back because of this issue. Which probably started giving some ideas to some of the thought leaders, some of the business leaders, that what could be sustained here. For example, one of the very simple things that we keep saying, and you must have probably heard, is maybe the future of work is going to change irreversibly. Let's say a lot of people are looking to work from home, for example, reduce travel, for example, and so on and so forth, which could have a good impact on the Earth's resources, for that matter. Okay, right. So there could be some learnings to take away from this, and we will see what are the other action plans that can be done in order to pull back the Earth Overshoot Day to make it more sustainable and so on and so forth. Okay, but this is the environment aspect of it. We will also come to the social and economic aspects as well. Okay, good. Yeah, of course, there is another question which says we are behind the Sustainable Development Goals. So to what extent should industry focus on the rest of the SDGs in order to build performance? So we'll look at some of the areas that we could focus on, and I have a good chart to explain that, Colin. Okay, I'll come to that. Okay, good. So what does it mean for purchasing? We have looked at some statistics, we have looked at some data. So what do I do? From procurement, what do I do? Okay, this is the first question that would come to mind. So in order to give you a quick graph, a chart of what does it mean for purchasing. Okay, so this is again a simple study. It's a simplified graph of a study which was much deeper, which talks about a very classic supply chain. So you get resources from nature, there's transportation, there is production, manufacturing, etc. Then you have the product distribution, and then you have the consumers on one side. Very, very simple supply chain, which is touching many domains. We're probably not considering a lot of the services elements and so on and so forth, but this is a very classical supply chain that we see in large parts of the world across many businesses, right? And on the y-axis, you see the social and environmental footprint, effectively, the social and environmental footprint of these particular different steps in the supply chain. Okay, now what we see is that to a large extent, manufacturing, production basically has managed to pull down its social and environmental footprint. Okay, so they have done relatively well. Let's say they have done relatively well as compared to other areas to pull down their social and environmental footprint. So with with manufacturing 4.0, digitalizing a few things, lean manufacturing. So these are all topics that we have heard since almost 50 years now, right? More recently, the 4.0, the implementation of AI, and so on and so forth, the information gathered. So manufacturing has contributed quite a bit in reducing their social and environmental footprint. Where does where does procurement feature here? So you can see here, typically, if you look at procuring stuff and providing it internally to manufacturing, what we are talking about is largely on touching our supply source, so natural resources and transportation. That's where largely procurement is placed. And beyond that, on the product distribution and consumer side, it could be sales, marketing, and others. Okay, logistics, and so on and so forth. Okay, so logistics, of course, is there both sides. But if you look at procurement, largely it is focusing on the natural resources and transportation side. So getting stuff from our suppliers into our factories, and then the sales and marketing team responsible for product distribution up to the usage of the consumer. Okay, so we can see that there is a lot that still procurement could do, in optimizing their performance. Manufacturing has done some of its part, so well done to them. But as procurement, we are still lagging slightly behind in our contribution to the social and environmental factors. So there are a lot of action plans that could be done. And we are going to see in the next slide, what are the different actions that are currently ongoing, where are they contributing, which are easy to implement, and how much business value that they add. Okay, so this is what we are going to see in the next slide. Okay, so this is from, again, the source from the World Economic Forum report. What you can see on the top, you have two basic graphs. Okay, one is talking about the business value contribution as compared to the ease of implementation, and the other on the right side, that matrix talks about the socio-environmental value versus the ease of implementation. Okay, and on the bottom you have all these different action plans that could be done. Yeah, these are largely, you can see largely the action plans are related to procurement, supply chain action plans. Okay, so just take one example. I'll just take one example and explain you the graph. So let's look at the first one, right, where you have reduced weight or size of packaging material. So you could, as procurement, you could work with your design team, your engineering team, marketing team, and so on and so forth, to reduce the size and weight of packaging, which has a big impact downstream as well in transportation and so on and so forth. Working with your suppliers, innovation, tons of activities that could be done here. Let's look at the contribution. So the ease of implementation, what it says, and if you see one on the first matrix, one is right at the top. Right at the top in the middle, okay, which is basically an efficiency strategy, which is in red. You can see those different icons there. Red is efficiency strategy, then you have the holistic strategy, green is the legitimating strategy, and yellow is the risk mitigation strategy, right? So you have one, which is reducing weight or size of packaging material, which is relatively easy to implement. Okay, it's between 5 and 6. But it gives a very high business value. Okay, very high business value. And if you look at the same one on the right-hand side, yes, the ease of implementation remains the same. Yeah, and in terms of socio-environmental value, it is also high. So, like, if you have to pick up an action plan, for example, reducing weight or size of packaging material is an action plan, which could be, let's say, ease of implementation is quite high, gives a very high business value, and has a good contribution on the social and environmental factors, right? So now if you look at some of these action plans, some action plans can be having a short-term large impact. So quick wins, because the ease of implementation is very high. It's the top right corner. The ease of implementation is very high. Plus you get a high business value as well as a high socioeconomic value. So if you look at, for example, you have actions like 16, yeah, use innovative vehicle technologies and tires. Yeah, 16 is there. The ease of implementation is around 6 in this case, and it has a high business value as well as a high socio-environmental value. If you look at actions 31 and 10, I think most of the companies are doing this. 31 is right at the top corner. Yeah, enforcing very high environmental health and safety standards. Yeah, so you have your EHS standards, you have your audits to your suppliers, etc., etc. So the entire supply chain is under good control of compliance, right? It has a very high socioeconomic value, very high business value, and very easy to implement. If you look at number 10, yeah, source from sustainable suppliers. So again, you follow up. If you go downstream of your supply chain, select the right kind of suppliers, you can see that there is a very high business value, very high socio-environmental value, plus the ease of implementation is, it's quite easy to implement such actions. So this example gives you, this particular chart gives you some examples of the action plans that could be taken as procurement and supply chain, and just gives you an indication on the ease of implementation and the contribution it does to business value as well as socio-environmental value. So what we talked about in the beginning of economical contribution, social contribution, and environmental contribution, right? So this is a mix of these three elements, and you have just some examples here of the variety of action plans that can be taken under consideration from procurement perspective, and look at the contributions that you could do personally with your teams, with your companies, on the business value as well as the socio-environmental value. Okay, so if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to type your questions. I will pick them up later on. Right, so this is, when I say now we're translating, what does it mean for purchasing? Yes, it means it's very critical. Procurement can do a lot of activities, as you can see. Some examples were given there. So how can you integrate purchasing in sustainability? And for this, I'll just give you very simple case studies. There are 2 case studies, and then a small process of how you could start integrating sustainability in your daily action plans. The first case study is of a big furniture company. I wouldn't be surprised if you can already guess which one is this. So the usage of more recycled material. Yeah, the usage of more recycled material. Then we have the design of products by circular design principles. So one of my colleagues, Hervé, he did a webinar earlier about circular designing, about circular economy, which also touches circular design principles, right? But basically designing products to make sure that you can reduce, reuse, recycle, so that there is lesser impact, okay, of your actions on the different elements of social and environmental and economic factors. Affordable home solar products, sustainable biofuels for container vehicles which transport the product. So we saw that transportation was having a high impact. So companies are doing that using sustainable biofuel. Then we have single-use plastic home furnishings which have been discontinued. I was just checking up the website of this company to look at the different products that they have, and seen that largely single-use plastic home furnishing products are now discontinued. Okay, so this is a very simple case study. There's only the top of the the tip of the iceberg actions. There are many more, but just to give you an example, that these are all the action plans where procurement was largely involved and contributing to these sustainability actions. Usage of more recycled material, having the right kind of suppliers, and so on. Working with the design team upfront to look at the design for the supply chain, let's say. Sustainable biofuel for transportation, working closely with logistics, and so on. So working with marketing to look at how single-use plastic home furnishings can be discontinued. Okay, so this is one example from a company largely involved in manufacturing. The other one, the next case study that we're going to see is in the business of chocolate. Okay, generic. So there are many companies which are following this. So you have purely in terms of sourcing, where procurement is largely involved, obviously, is raw material sourcing. You have the buying sustainable cocoa seeds, for example, okay, or tracing ingredients back to their origin using certain technologies like blockchain and so on and so forth, supporting the farmers, making sure that a large portion of the middlemen, let's say, could be, could have a lesser contribution, so that the value add of the entire supply chain goes mostly to the farmers who are in the most need. Okay, in this case, then you have helping farmers manage their farms with certain good practices, optimization of the land use, reducing the chemical use, avoiding intermediaries. This is what I said, reducing the middleman, so that you have a good value add to the bottom of the supply chain, optimize transport routes, and so on. So this is where procurement is largely involved. Okay, then you have other areas like production, where you have improving material efficiency, wastewater consumption and recycling. There are some action plans that are being taken place, and this is not only in one company which is making chocolates, but across a variety. I've seen at least 3 or 4 companies which make chocolate, which are using this kind of an efficiency improvement study. And then finally, you have consumption, which is consumers basically. So efficient packaging, when you're giving these products to the consumers, not only in primary packaging, but also in secondary packaging, tertiary packaging, recycling of pallets, and so on and so forth. So you can see that procurement is involved in this case again across various, in fact, the entire cycle of from procurement till consumption, with the consumers. So it gives you even some example, and these are case studies which have happened, which tells that yes, it is possible. There's an ease of implementation and a business value, and these companies chose these action plans to put in place to contribute as much as possible to the sustainable action plan for their companies. Okay, so I haven't given these 2 case studies. We'll come towards the close on how can purchasing integrate sustainability. If you say tomorrow, I want to start an action plan in my company and sell my idea to my internal stakeholders, how I can do that? First is build up a business case. So build your business case, highlight on how you could reduce costs, how you could reduce risks, how you could improve the brand image, and the new opportunities that this new action plans propose. So building up a solid business case is one of the first steps would recommend before you even start talking to the stakeholders. You could of course build it together with them, right, to have a robust case study and then present it to a larger base of your stakeholders. But having a solid case is something which is critical at the beginning. Okay, you could also do a benchmarking with other companies within the ecosystem. Okay, who is doing what, to understand a bit about the competition. Maybe you have you're part of some consortiums, you're part of a lot of professional networks on LinkedIn and so on and so forth. You could understand from there who is doing what, where do you stand in the in this ocean of sustainability. Can I implement something similar? Do I have the resources? Do I have the right kind of resources to implement something similar? And can I use the existing ecosystem? If a competitor has probably developed a supplier and there is a possibility that you could use this existing ecosystem of suppliers or partners and distributors and so on and so forth, why not? Can I use the existing ecosystem? Is a question. If there are companies which have protected this through various tools, then maybe you have a hindrance there. But the idea is to understand, could you use, and no need to reinvent the wheel here in many cases, that if you could use the existing ecosystem. So benchmarking is something which is critical, and also link it. Then the next step is also link it to what do the customers want. Obviously, are your plans matching those of your customers? Is this what the customers are expecting? So you could also integrate the sales and CSR people in this case to understand whether what you have an idea is actually matching the customer, and then adapt and fill up the gaps, right? And finally, you're building a team. So you can't do that alone. It's not an action plan which is solely responsibility of procurement. Procurement is obviously taking leads here, but you need to build up a team. There's also an element of that you could create an urgency factor and a fear of missing out, the FOMO factor, to make sure that your case is well heard. And if there is a sponsor in your company, you could convince the sponsor in a better way, right? And if possible, communicate early success stories. So if you have some low-hanging fruits, like in the graph I show here, if you have some low-hanging fruits here, which can have a short-term large impact or even an incremental, so you have plenty of examples given here, even an incremental impact, you could use them as success stories and communicate with the stakeholders to say that, hey guys, it is working well, and let's move ahead and go to the next step. Okay, so this is something like a guideline, let's say, very simple 4-step guideline to tell you how you could build your case and how you could sell to your internal stakeholders about your sustainability actions. All right, good. And the last part, we talk about the benefits. So we have been talking about the benefits of sustainable procurement practices, but in concrete ways, I've just listed down 4, but there's certainly much more, and there's certainly much more benefits. There are sometimes not really tangible benefits. There could be some intangible benefits as well. But very purely talking in terms of tangible benefits, we have, of course, cost reduction. Yeah, this is what I mentioned when you're building a case. Could be cost reduction, risk reduction, and so on. So cost reduction, so you could have reduced TCO, effectively, reduced over specification. When you talk about designing and so on and so forth, we could have reduced over specification. We talked about circular economy, reduce, reuse, recycle. So all these elements combined, which is one of the strong skeletons of sustainability, could give you reduced costs in the company. And when you have reduced costs, obviously you're hitting directly the profitability of the company, right? You're contributing positively directly to the profitability of the company. Then you have another benefit, which is a big benefit of risk reduction, right? You eliminate risky suppliers through your audits, through enforcing very strict EHS policies, code of conduct, and so on and so forth. So obviously you're eliminating all those risky suppliers. Of course, you have compliance. With this transparency, you have across different countries, different geographies, different domains, industries, you have regulations, policies. And any breach of these elements could bring a very high cost to your company. If there is a breach in regulations, or if there's a breach in some standards due to your supply chain, you could incur huge compliance costs. So with sustainable practices, obviously you reduce those compliance costs and make sure that this information is transparent. And lastly, of course, it gives a competitive advantage for a company. Premium status. More and more consumers are actually being sensitive now. So if sometimes I know there's a big marketing, let's say, study is you have consumers and you put in front of the consumers where you have the 2 products, let's say, one with non-sustainable practices, one with sustainable practices with a slightly premium status. A consumer is now tending to move towards the more sustainable practice with a slightly premium. So they are okay to pay an additional. They're okay to pay an additional certain percentage just to be aligned with the sustainable practices. Okay, so that's the change that we have seen in consumer behavior as well. So more and more consumers are being aware of sustainability and are rejecting some of the companies which are not sustainable. Okay, so obviously that is going to give you another competitive advantage. So one question here, what is FOMO? So FOMO is fear of missing out. Okay, so this is creating an urgency. I'm just going back one slide. The creating an urgency, what we talked about, that this is a need of the hour. We need to put an action plan. And fear of missing out. So what would happen if we don't jump onto the bandwagon, let's say? What would happen if we don't do this action plan? So there's a fear of missing out. And that fear could probably lead to convincing the internal stakeholders in a better way. So this is fear of missing out. Okay, Stefan. Good. So these are some of the benefits of sustainable procurement practices. As you can see, a lot of advantages. Yeah, very clearly. These are just some of the advantages, but you could have many more effectively. Yeah, based on whatever action plans you take. Okay. Good. So that was it. What we have quickly looked at is what is sustainability. Make a quick summary. What is sustainability? three-pronged impact on planet, profit, people, which is basically the environmental factor, the social factor, and the economic factor. All right. Now, why it is important? We just looked at some of the factors of Human Development Index, the Earth Day, the Earth Overshoot Day, a lot of pressure on the natural resources of the Earth. And if more and more countries, more and more companies want to push towards that higher Human Development Index, there is more and more pressure on the Earth. So this is where we say that it is an important factor. And that is why sustainability as a practice has descended below as a basic need, along with profitability and stability of companies. Okay. Then we looked at what does it mean for procurement. Yeah. So we have seen some of the other departments like manufacturing here, which have contributed a lot already. Procurement, not so much. So you have a variety of action plans that are available. And we have seen some of the action plans, which are classified in terms of ease of implementation and contribution to business value and social and economic value, right? So we have a lot of action plans which are possible from procurement, and how to do it is the action plan that we saw. You have making the business case, looking at benchmarking, what are the people doing, getting to know the consumer, what the consumer wants, and then finally convincing your internal stakeholders through various ways. And then, of course, we have seen some of the advantages. Okay, right. One comment here. I'm just looking at the comments now. You're free to ask questions at any point of time. So this is about what we have seen today as a summary. That's it from my side. Yeah, I'm now open to questions. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to add on into the chat. Okay, and Fred here will help me to filter out and see which are the right questions and comments and so on and so forth, so that we can see the contribution that you have. So I'm just looking at the chat now. So millennials, there's one comment, yes, from Danielle. Millennials are also looking at the CSR records of company before they apply for the job. They're absolutely true, yeah. So millennials are more and more sensitive, let's say sensitive in terms of contributing to companies which are having a more sustainable record. So given choice between a non-sustainable company practicing sustainable practices versus one which is not, they would rather tend to move towards the company which has robust and good sustainable practices. Yeah. Thomas says you disagree that customers would pay more. So this is only a niche. Yeah, this is today. I agree. A lot of countries, again, depending on the economic factors and so on and so forth. Consumers would say, okay, I want cheap, cheap, cheap. I don't care about the environment. And this is where, a big portion of the action plans are going to come forward. I'll tell you an example. I come from India originally. Okay, I come from India, and it's a similar that we see in China also. Yeah, more and more people are having disposable income today. Yeah, in India and a large part of Asia. So for many years, they didn't have that disposable income. So today they have this disposable income, and they are going to use this disposable income. They are going to consume more. So they say, to hell with environment. A lot of people might say that, to hell with environment. I have my money. I'm going to enjoy. I'm going to have a high standard of living and consume. Right. So that's a part of community that we are seeing. And these consumers may not be very sensitive. Yeah, as you said, Thomas. Right? Is that right? You said these consumers may not be very sensitive. But then we have seen a change over the past few years, last 5-10 years, that there is a lot of people who are, becoming more and more sensitive and moving towards these. It's not a big percentage, but it is increasing. That is what I meant by saying that there is slowly a change in behavioral aspects of consumers, that they're moving towards products or towards services which are more sustainable. It is still going to take time. Yeah, it's still going to take time because a large part is not there yet. Large part of consumers are not there yet, but it is moving. It is moving towards, and they're okay to pay this premium cost associated with the sustainable actions. Okay, right. Then you have COVID crisis. Yeah, COVID crisis. Yeah, I say again. This is again a crisis that was unforeseen. So it has a blip, as you know. Not many people have this economic facility, let's say, to go for premium. But yes, this is a blip. But we'll see again in the future hopefully things return back to normalcy quickly, where you will have an increased consciousness of sustainable practices. Okay. So I'm just looking at others. Very good. Okay, thank you very much. How procurement can support organizations which are not producing anything, just working in service areas. So one example here, it's a good point, service areas, yeah. One example, and this is again a result of the COVID crisis also, is before a lot of the times in service areas, if you look at consulting, okay, if you look at consulting, let's say IT consulting or strategy consulting and so on and so forth, which is again a big part of the service area, is there was a lot of movement of people, transportation, for example. There was an absolute need for a face-to-face meeting. There was a huge impact on environment associated with that based on. And what this COVID crisis did was, with this evolution of these fantastic tools that we have seen, like what we are doing today, even with Zoom and Teams and Skype and so on and so forth, a big part of the transportation cost was just cut. So of transportation was just cut. So people realized that it was okay to work from home. It was okay to have virtual meetings, giving results, maybe not with the 100% efficiency like a face-to-face meeting, but just good enough to have the right results coming out of those meetings. So in service areas, the biggest impact that we have seen from the COVID crisis is on the transportation. Yeah, people with reduced transportation, with larger use of these tools, technical tools, which have maintained the same level of communication and service delivery eventually. We can give you an example of EIPM, yeah, ourselves. We have virtually shifted overnight to online trainings, for example. Yeah, so online trainings was just quick, and we are a part of the service industry as well. So again, an impact which is quite largely seen for many companies in terms of cost and transportation and so on and so forth. So yes, procurement can look for the right kind of suppliers in this case, which have this facility of moving into digital, and then can onboard them into their portfolio for contributions. Okay. I'm just looking at some other areas, some of the questions. Just a second. So cost savings, Vanda here asks, cost savings sometimes are not compatible with sustainability. How to transform it in a compatible way. So this is where I talked about, if you look at the slide which is present here, it's when you talk about competitive advantage and cost reduction, they could be sometimes inversely proportional, yeah, where you want to give a premium status, which means you are putting in a higher cost, right, and customer is willing to pay. But at the same time, we talk about reduced TCO. Yeah, we are talking about reduced over specifications. All these are a part of sustainable actions, which are ultimately giving you cost reductions. Yeah, so there could be cases, yes, where sometimes they are not compatible, but these could be compromised or compensated by the customer base who are ready to pay for that premium. Yeah, who are ready to pay. Otherwise, there could be many actions which are very much compatible with sustainability. For those who are not, again, looking at how to transfer these into getting the premium status and having a niche consumer base to pay for that premium status. Yeah. So yes, there are two ways. One, which is compatible with reduced TCO and reduced over specifications and so on. The others, which is not, but then we have that niche consumer base for those particular premium status, let's say. Okay, good. All right, any other questions? So thank you, Stefan, for your comment about green procurement. Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Any other questions that you have? So there's one, yeah, sorry, I missed one, with sustainable supply chain certification. So there are various companies. I think when I worked with, I was working with Alstom Transport before. We had EcoVadis as a partner, and we had EcoVadis certification for our suppliers, basically. Yeah. So this is, again, some of the, it depends really on the sector you are in. SIDEX, you mentioned, yes, but we have EcoVadis also, similar ones, which are linked to your business domain that you could look for as the right certification for your supply chain, downstream supply chain, to integrate into the sustainability program. But there are different certifications across different domains. Yeah, so you could look for the right one, really. Yeah, as I said, I come from manufacturing sector, so we used EcoVadis quite a bit at that time. Okay, just one last question. I'm just going to look at one last question. Yeah, so there is a question which is a more of a macro question, which says, yeah, there are countries which are willing to pay for sustainable products, yeah, which with a high human development index, and some others with a comparatively low index don't care much about sustainability. This is what I mentioned also. I come from India and China, so this is going to take some time. How to create a common proposal? How to create a common proposal for all such markets? In fact, it's very challenging. It's like saying, can I use the same marketing message? I'm just giving an example. Can I use the same marketing message for a consumer in the US or Europe versus a consumer in China and India? I would say no. Yeah, because you need to adapt to the consumer base. So one common proposal would be slightly challenging. There have been cases where, in fact, the innovation and products which are made for Europe could be transferred to countries which are with a low human development index. But at the same time, sorry, I hope you're able to hear me. Sorry. At the same time, you could have products which are actually made for market with a low human development index, which can be transferred again to a higher. So this is about the reverse innovation that we have seen. But largely in many industries, in many companies, they have these very specific products and marketing messages which are addressed to that right base of consumers. So as I said, again, it's like the marketing message in the US and India probably would adapt. Yeah, probably would adapt the product, probably would adapt the message to do it. So it's a bit challenging. Yeah, it's a bit challenging for that. Yeah, and as Sergey says, yeah, China and India are more than 1 billion people. So there is a completely different dynamics that goes on when we talk about sustainability. Yeah. If we talk about European countries on an average, let's say if we talk about France, 65 million, we are talking about Belgium, 12, 13 million, 11 million people. Spain, UK, around 50, 60 million people. But when we talk about billions, it's a different message that is necessary, different type of products which are necessary there. One simple example that I'll give you, one simple example is, as I said, people didn't have disposable income, for example, in India for many years. Yeah, now they have it. So when a lot of the FMCG companies came into the Indian markets, and then when the liberalization happened in the 90s, and a lot of FMCG companies flew, literally overcrowded the market. People had a lot of products were sold in these small sachets, because people couldn't afford to buy products in bulk. So they were one-time usage, two-time usage kind of small sachets, which created a big environmental impact later on because of a lot of plastic being used. And that has been now slowly eliminated in most of the urban areas. So there has been a lot of changes. Again, these changes are going to be slow because people, again, as I said, when they recognize what is the exact consumer need in these kind of markets, the companies will respond accordingly. Okay, but having the same message in Europe, US as compared to Asia, I wouldn't be a strong supporter of that. Need to adapt according to the consumer. Okay. Yes, Thomas, I agree with you. Yeah, you said, yeah, we can do everything in Europe, but the rest of the world is much bigger. Yeah, and as you know, more than almost 50% of the population would be living in a particular certain zone of India, China, Southeast Asia over the next few years. So we need to focus on those areas as well. Okay, and Axel, yes, certainly the good example would be to reduce consumption, reduce, reuse, recycle here as much as possible in Europe and the US. so that there could be a good example that is being set eventually. Okay. Good. All right. We don't have any more questions here. So what I would like to say in the end is thank you very much for your time. We are on time. We are finishing in an hour, and I hope it gave you some insights into what is sustainability, how can procurement contribute, some of the action plans, a couple of case studies that we have seen, and then taking it forward. There's a model. This presentation will be shared. Yeah. So Fred, you can communicate that. Whoever has participated in this webinar will be sent the presentation. Okay. I'm just going to include the poll, the results of the poll also that we have seen. So you will receive that as well. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your time, and hope to cross paths with you sometime in the future. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye then.